Hiya, my name is Ramona Armitage and I'm an abstract artist based in London. I grew up in Bradford in West Yorkshire and always knew I wanted to move to London. So I went to art school at Leeds College of Art, and then as soon as it came around to applying for university, I just applied for pretty much all the art unis that I thought were in London. I ended up accepting a place at the University of the Creative Arts in Epsom, which I thought was in London or near enough, and then moved there and got the shock of my life where I realised it was actually a very quiet commuter town, about an hour out of London, and was very much not the fancy London lifestyle I'd been dreaming of, which in hindsight now is pretty hilarious, but at the time it was, not so much. The reason I've been so obsessed with the idea of London was because I had big dreams of becoming a fashion designer. I'd spent my school years drawing dress designs on pretty much every book I owned, and had studied fashion all the way through college and was set yes, this is what I'm going to do with my life. So university arrives and we get set a project, which was to sneak into or blag our ways into working at as many London Fashion Week shows as possible, which was pretty fun to begin with, until I got yelled at and chucked out of a backstage area at a show by a PR who was super mad at me for taking photos of the backstage area to document this for my uni assignment. So I sat on the steps of Somerset House in London at 8 o'clock in the morning, absolutely crying my eyes out. And then after that, I pretty much just stopped going to uni. I stopped enjoying fashion, had essentially just been completely put off the whole industry, and then transferred onto a graphic design course for my second year, which was much more relaxed, but is something that I'm just not very good at and unfortunately don't have much of an interest in long term. Even so, I made it to graduation, got my degree, and then walked straight out of the door and straight into the first bar job I could find. And I stayed in bar work for over 5 years, barely doing any art at all. I was doing random little bits of illustration work throughout, but didn't really know what I was doing with my life, and started painting as a kind of release. I was mainly doing portraits at this point, and then ended up experimenting with abstract painting, particularly painting what I saw when I listened to music as a way of a sort of distraction from my brain and unwinding. Was almost using it as a sort of therapy. It wasn't until a few years later that I realised that actually painting music and seeing colours to music was not a normal thing for everyone. At the time, I'd never heard of synesthesia. I just hadn't really thought about it at all, to be honest. And then one day I saw an interview with another artist who had synesthesia, and she was describing it on camera, and I was just like, what the hell is this person talking about? Everyone has that. Anyway, I went away and Googled it afterwards, and then realised that no, it's not actually the norm for everyone to be able to visualise music in the same way that I do. And that's pretty much when I started trying to focus in on my synesthesia and explore it on a deeper level within my work. My work is completely influenced by music and what I see when I listen to it, so I can't say that my upbringing directly influenced the work that I'm creating today. But I can say that I was very lucky to grow up in what I would describe as a pretty art-rich environment. As I said before, I grew up in Bradford, West Yorkshire, which is a chronically underfunded part of the country. Growing up, there wasn't really a centre of town. Most of the high street had been lying empty for years and years, and there's a lot of poverty in Bradford. But what I think is really amazing about Bradford is that it's always had an amazing kind of community spirit about it, and a real collaborative kind of can-do attitude. So whilst there wasn't much government funding going around most of the time, there was always lots of creative events being run by the community. So we had a large culture festival, we had a lot of indie theatre and music events and open house art trails and things like that. So I was very lucky to live just around the corner from one of the biggest parks in Bradford as well growing up, which happens to have a small gallery in called Cartwright Hall, which we'd visit whenever we went to the park. We're also just down the road from Saltaire, which is a heritage town and the home to David Hockney's gallery. So we'd regularly have kind of family days out and go see new exhibits. I think I was very lucky to have these things nearby growing up. Aside from that, my mum and dad are both very into art and music. So I think that must have definitely fed through and influenced me in some way to the work I create now. My dad's a music obsessive, so you can always find him sat listening to music. He's always very up to date with new music when I was growing up, so it's always kind of a part of my life. I didn't really share the same music taste as him growing up, or at least I pretended not to, but now we do listen to a lot of the same music. I'm actually named after a Bob Dylan song because that's one of their favourite musicians, which as a kid I thought was the absolute lamest, most embarrassing thing ever. But now I think it's pretty cool. Also, my mum was a primary school teacher, so she'd always be making things and getting me to test out the craft she was planning on teaching in school. So she's very creative, was always doing night classes and things, and she's taught me a lot of skills over the years. So stuff like ceramics, silk painting, glass painting, lots and lots of different skills which I hope to hopefully start using to support my painting practice in the near future. My biggest art influence growing up, I would say it was probably Lucian Freud. I've always found his work just so magnetic and raw, and he's one of those artists whose work I could just sit with for hours and never be bored. His work was the first thing that I think I ever saw where I felt this real instant emotional connection and kind of realised that art wasn't necessarily just pretty and decorative. I can't say you can see much of his influence in my work, but I think it gave me the go-ahead to feel comfortable really putting that raw energy and emotion into a piece and not feeling embarrassed by it. A living artist that I really admire and look up to at the moment is Daisy Paris. Their paintings are just so kind of alive and visceral and bursting with emotion that they almost make me want to cry when I look at them. It's a big dream of mine to one day own a piece of their work, and I hope that my work can evoke some of that energy as well. Right now, in my practice, I'm focusing on building a larger collection of abstract works. I recently moved out of my shared studio space. I now have my own space for the first time, so it's allowing me to really scale up the paintings that I'm doing and create some more detailed pieces that I've had sketched out for the past couple of years, but just haven't really had the space to create yet. My style's developed quite dramatically over the past year that I've allowed myself more time to focus on painting. So I'm actually really excited to see where I can get to over the year coming up. I'm also focusing on developing my skills in oil painting at the moment. Oils are something that I only started working with last year, and it's been such an enormous learning curve, but I'm well and truly hooked and just really, really enjoying learning a new medium and starting to incorporate oils into my abstract practice as well. What is the biggest challenge of being an artist? It sounds super cheesy, but the biggest challenge for me at the moment is kind of keeping on believing in myself and continuing to create work. I recently decided to quit my 9-to-5 job and focus on art full time. I'm still very new to the art scene. I didn't study painting at university, so I'm more or less self-taught in the area that I'm working in. So I'm still figuring things out. Me and my boyfriend recently decided to move into a camper van full time to relieve some of the monetary stress of living in London, which has really allowed me to focus all my funds onto my art. So yeah, it's very scary making the leap and choosing to actually put yourself out there. And it's something that you very rarely hear other artists or artists that are comfortable in their career discussing. So yeah, I'd say making the choice to just keep working at it every single day is one of the most challenging things for any artist. It's absolutely terrifying and it takes a lot of self-belief and courage for anyone, I think, no matter what level you are in your career. Some advice I would give to my younger self would be just to take time out for yourself and not rush into life. I definitely rushed into a lot of things when I was younger, and I always look back and wonder if I just carried on doing what I actually wanted to do, rather than what I felt was expected of me or what society wants you to do, like chasing a career, go to uni, that kind of thing. Like, where would I be now? So yeah, I'd say to my younger self, do everything you want to do when you want to do it. Travel if you can. Just think about what you actually want to do and not what everyone else expects from you. Just go out there and do it. My way of making work is very intuitive, and as I'm trying to represent something that only exists in my head, there are times that occasionally I've not seen a technique that replicates the vision I have. So yeah, I spend a lot of time testing out ways of mark making and building the layers of each painting before I actually put it onto the canvas. Sometimes it completely backfires and I do a technique that just doesn't work and completely ruins the painting, but usually it plays out okay. My practice revolves entirely around music. So when I'm in the studio, I always have something that I'm listening to. When I first started creating synesthesia paintings, I would try and complete the painting in one sitting. So I'd listen to one single song on repeat for hours and hours and hours until the painting was finished. But as I've developed my practice over the past couple of years, I found that my paintings benefit a lot more from being worked on over the space of a few months. It just allows me time to kind of reevaluate, think about the composition a little bit more, rather than doing it all in one sitting. So now, rather than listening to the same song for hours and hours and hours, I'll start with a digital sketch first. I usually listen to the song on loop for around half an hour while I'm making the sketch, which allows me to focus on the core colours and the composition of the painting. And I tend to work on around 5 or 6 paintings at a time now and jump between them. So it's really handy for me to have these digital sketches to work from when I'm building up the base structure of each piece. The movement of the painting and the brushstrokes are all built out and inspired by the flow and the rhythm of the music. So once the initial composition has been built out on the canvas, I'll then go back to listening to the song on repeat whilst I paint the details. I used to find that I was going a little bit stir crazy listening to the same song for hours, so this way of working allows me to sort of take a step back and assess the overall painting a little more. Even so, it does mean that my Spotify Wrapped is pretty predictable every single year. What's the best reaction someone has had to my artwork? We have a big open studios event twice a year at Wimbledon Art Studios, which is where I'm based, and it's great because we get a complete mix of people coming in. On one hand, you'll have seasoned collectors and gallerists coming down, but then you also often have people who've just wandered in off the street or seen a billboard on the tube and decided to pop in who are just completely new to it. So you get a real mixture of people discussing your art, which I find really amazing. But my favourite thing is when people tell me what they see in my paintings. It's always so interesting because everyone sees something completely different, and I really love to hear what people take from my work without any outside knowledge or interaction. One thing I really hope people take away from my work is just a sense of energy. The most important work to me personally, the ones that trigger something deep down when I look at them. So yeah, I hope that people take a sense of energy from my work, and I hope that they're able to feel some sort of emotion and the emotion that I put into the work and take that away with them.